All right, we begin here in Nigeria. MTN Nigeria, of course, releasing their half-year results. There is their revenues. We're going to get very in-depth here. 1.1 trillion naira, 22% growth year on year for the first half of the year. Joining us to discuss is Modupe Kadri. He is, of course, the Chief Financial Officer of MTN Nigeria. Good morning, sir. Thank you so much for joining us. Good to see you again.
Good morning, Rashid. Thanks for having me here.
Fantastic. So your revenues, I want to start there because it was 2019 that you first crossed, I believe, 1 trillion naira mark. 3 years later, it was 2 trillion. And here we are with this run rate. If you keep at it, I think you do 2.2 for the year. I wanted to ask you first off, do you think we will ever see a company doing 3 trillion naira in revenues on the Nigerian exchange?
Well, that's very much on track, at least if you look at our numbers and based on the guidance we gave the market in terms of our Ambition 2025, we've always said that we'll see our service revenues at least 20% service revenue growth year on year.
Wow.
So if you extrapolate that, sometime 2025, or even as early as 2024, you will hit that 3 trillion mark. But while we're talking about revenue, just permit me just to digress a little bit.
Certainly.
Because oftentimes we focus on the top line. Everybody thinks about 1 trillion, 2 trillion, 3 trillion now.
Yeah.
And then everybody's saying, okay, MTN is taking all this money. But if you look at the financials and you look at up down to the profit before tax or even the profit after tax, so the profit before tax about 16.7% of that, which means all that value has been distributed across the value chain. And of course, even the profit after tax is even about 10.7%. So that's actually what goes to the shareholders of the company. So I think when that narrative goes about the headline revenue, we should also see what goes back to the owners of the company, or the shareholders, as it were. And you can see that that's about just barely 11%.
Certainly. Now, I wanted to ask you about the breakdown in revenues, particularly voice versus data. Do you see data? How do you see the race between the two? I'm wondering if if you have competition units between voice, data, and so on, because the voice still seems to be the major revenue earner. I mean, almost half a trillion, I think. With 562 billion. But data, in terms of the margin of growth, actually, digital and data. Digital had the biggest margin of growth, 50% growth. Data, 35%. Will data one day catch up with voice?
Well, if you look at Ambition 2025, of course, without a doubt, shadow of doubt, it will catch up. And even if you look at the evolution since 2020, voice used to account for 67% of revenue. It's now 49%. And if you also look at data, on the other hand, it used to account for 24% of revenue. It's now 41%. And if you look at the year-on-year growth on voice and data, so voice did about 12.1% year-on-year, whilst data did about 35%. So you see it's actually growing at a faster rate. So what actually drives data growth? It's actually your smartphone penetration. So how many devices are going to be 3G and above enabled? So even as at H1, we still have roughly about 36% of the devices on the network still on 2G. They are feature phones. So what do feature phones do? They can just basically do voice and some SMS and stuff like that. So I think as obviously the economy has to recover, the people's ability to afford a smart device has to increase, and then that will accelerate the data catching up or exceeding voice in a short while.
I have to give a shout out to one of my colleagues, Bamidele. I call him the data man because whenever he's taking a break, he's always on his phone. Capital expenditure.
Yeah.
Now, I think part of what you've explained here, your CapEx has to have some kind of impact on expanding voice and so on. Now, it did drop. Can you tell us, what the challenges were? 266 billion, but 14% year-on-year decline. Well, what happened there?
Well, basically, I think we've always been communicating to the market. We had some FX challenges in terms of the paucity of FX. So, and the way it works normally is that, you open LCs, which are backed by Naira. It depends on the central bank to backfill those things. And then you can get those equipment in. So I guess it was an election year, a lot of moving parts, as you all know. So H1, there was actually positive FX in the market. So So that actually slowed the rollout down. And now with the liberalization of the exchange rates, hopefully that will pick up. So we'll see activities picking up in H2 to catch up where we are on that.
Fantastic. I want to ask you about subscribers. Now, we have data from the NCC, the regulator, showing, of course, that as far as GSM ownership. No, actually, this is your actual H1. So, yeah, okay, here we go. So 38.74%, 85.5 million. So as GSM, you're well in the lead, and and you've got the second, third, and fourth place here. But looking at, and if we go back to the actual previous graphic we just had, I did notice that your fintech subscribers, it did fall about 40% if you look at your own metrics. But this is interesting because even though fintech subscribers fell, your fintech revenue still grew. So what was happening with the fintech subscribers? Yeah, 7 million, but 39% drop there.
Okay, so two questions in one. So let's...
Sorry.
No problem. So let's look at the subscriber numbers. So the figures NCC reports are what all the operators report. But we, in terms of calculating our subscriber numbers, we adopt what you call it by directional traffic methodology. So we're actually looking at who we call and who calls us to dimension or to calculate what our subscribers is. So that's the number that we reported out there, about 77 million. Of course, other people, all operators could also report RGS 90, which just means anybody who has generated a call on your network over the last 90 days, passive subscriber numbers. And they are part of the subscriber numbers because you can't disconnect them until after a certain period as directed by the regulator. So
let's get back to fintech. Modupe Kadri is Chief Financial Officer of MTN Nigeria. You were just talking to us about the subscriber issues or rather the decline in fintech numbers.
Yeah, if you do recall, it seems like a long time that we had the cash crunch in.
Yes, yeah,
indeed. So everybody seems to have forgotten about that, but actually, it affected the numbers in Q1 because most of the over-the-counter transactions, will dip. So, but beyond that, there was a dip in numbers. That's correct. But we've since then gone along building a strong ecosystem. We've turned on back the NIPS integration, so you could actually do a two-way transfer now. And we're focusing more on building a robust ecosystem towards actualizing the potentials of the fintech business.
Great stuff. You've already explained what happened with FX as far as that half year loss. But I think it was 138 billion or so. That again, that's the liberalization of the exchange rate. Yes.
Correct.
Yeah. There was a quote, though. I do want to read a quote that we extracted from the results, which explain. This is why we love going into these results because they're like a really great story that explain everything. There's a quote there with the financials on forex losses where it says. The exchange rate is adjusted based on the reference rates at the end of the preceding quarter for some of the tower contracts and the average rate in the quarter for others. And then it also said that based on that, you might see more of this kicking in H2. So it says here, as a result, the full forex impact is expected to kick in H2. So does that mean, we might see a larger figure than what was referenced in H1?
So there are two ways to look at it. So what hit us in H1 mainly is the revaluation of your liabilities. So unless the movement is as large as what we've seen now, about 288 naira was the differential between the NAFEX and the CBN rate. So that's what hit most companies on the revaluation. So that's coming from revaluation of your balance sheet liabilities. So maybe your LCs, which you had opened at 468, you now need additional cash cover to make those things up. So that's on one. The OPEX aspect of it, the tower...
Sorry, just for our viewers, operating expenses.
Yes, operating expenses, sorry.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so the tower side of it is what's going to hit the operating expenses. And that's why the tower contract says that you pay those lease rentals quarterly in advance. So obviously this happened at H1. Now, if some of the portfolio of assets, a significant part of it, says that the applicable rate for Q3, which is what started on 1st of July, will be the average of the previous quarter. So bear in mind that 2 months in the previous quarter were at more or less 468 levels. And then the third month, so you average it out, probably having a blended rate of about 550. That's what's going to apply for Q3. However, in Q4, because now using Q3 rates, which are at 750 levels or 760 levels, then now you see the full impact of that. So yes, you would see an impact on that. And that's why in our earnings release, we also give some guidance that our medium-term EBITDA target range may not be achieved in this particular year of 53 to 55. Okay,
but still, in the results, you did say that the exchange rate liberalization in the mid to long term, you said you said it's good for the economy and it could bring in FDI. How's that going to benefit telcos? Okay, so two ways to look at it. I mean, look, first, we need access to FX. So we really need a market, a free market where you could, buy FX and where CapEx heavy in terms of most of the equipment we need to run the network are imported. And as a result, you need to have access to FX. Now, if there's a liberalization of the exchange rates, it means a willing buyer, willing seller, then you can also do that. But that also, begs the question that then you must be able to get prices for the products you're going to sell at commensurate levels. So, and that's where the economy would also get kick-started, because by then FDIs will come in, they start investing in industries. If they start investing in industries, what's going to happen? Disposable income will increase for the households, there'll be need for telecom services, and so on and so forth. So there's a ripple effect or a knock-on effect on having an open economy, an economy that works. And besides, if the analysts are correct, that with the correct interpretation of these policies, you should, in the medium term, see high single-digit growth in GDP, then that's going to be good for all parties and for the economy. And for us, like we said, when we talked about the voice to data conversion discussion, if you have a buoyant economy, you have the people are moving up from the bottom of the pyramid, then they can afford smarter devices and also take part of the digital dividends of faster, higher speed broadband technology. That's probably. Speaking of broadband, before I even get to broadband, your results, you said that mobile money, is a high priority for you in the second half of the year. You added another 1.1 million, so 3.1 million half-year Momo wallets, 55% growth. Your total wallets over 22 million. Can you speak to what the importance is? Is it a financial inclusion conversation, or what are these mobile money?
So when you look at it, if you look at the banking sector as a whole, how many people are actually have bank accounts?
Right.
So you have this question of, because they have different criteria in which you're going to look at how they're going to onboard customers, your KYC, the qualified, and even the footprint of the branch network to actually reach. So how about the people in the hinterland? So like we usually say, take the case of a herder, who has a flock of cattle. That's easily 100 million moving on wheels, as it were, but not banked. So we see that financial inclusion, or at least enabling everybody through a phone to have a mobile wallet, would also go a long way. And of course, also helps address the security issues, because when you have your money in electronic form, it's also good. You also have money outside of the formal banking sector. This process will help bring that in, that will help the authorities track these things. And of course, once all these monies are mobilized, then the banks will do what they're good at doing, that giving credit to people and also stimulating the economy. So we've seen this happen in other MTN markets, so it's also critical. And of course, Nigeria is a huge market, the biggest economy in Africa, and yet we still have that level of people outside of the banking sector that needs to be part of that. Yeah.
There's been a debate as to whether Nigeria should have a bank-led or telco-led financial inclusion strategy. I won't ask you because I know which side you're on. Let me get to broadband penetration in Nigeria. What do you make of this number? 48.8% as at May. I mean, it was 48.1 or something in January. How does this, we're not talking infrastructure now, and I know about your CapEx outlays and so on. How does this impact your Vision 2025 to get more internet connectivity in country?
So, As part of our Ambition 2025, we actually have a home-based broadband strategy, which is key. And, one of the problems in Nigeria is the infrastructure. So, you have two ways of getting broadband to the home. You could have the fiber, then we physically lay cables, but you also know the problems in terms of getting permits and actually even cost of laying this fiber is humongous. And also, you also have the road constructors who do not respect all these things. So that's one way. Then, of course, you can also do that through mobile broadband, which is what the 5G and 4G technology represents. So those numbers are, to us, we see it as an opportunity because then you could provide the right infrastructure or the right access to the internet through a mobile wireless device, be it a 5G router or a 5G or 4G MiFi or anything. So that's good. So numbers are low, it's a good opportunity, but it goes back to one of the things that we picked up during our investor roadshows, and that's, because there's a infrastructure deficit, you're going to either have to invest or you partner up with willing partners to do that. So in our own case, of course, right now, most MNOs are actually rolling out the 5G infrastructure.
Sorry, MNOs, mobile network. Network operators.
Mobile network operators, I'm sorry.
Thank you. I know you executives and your technical language, no problem, keep going.
That's all the players out there
yes,
are actually busy rolling out that technology. So I think it's key, and it's also crucial for the Nigerian government's aspirations when you talk about the digital economy, because if you don't put these things in place, then you're going to struggle with that policy or those goals. So I think we can get the numbers up. The capex with the devaluation, it's good. Of course, going to be a cause of concern, and of course, then like I said, the price points have to be right to make it worthwhile to roll that at scale.
We're out of time. One quick answer. Are you maybe it's going to be a quick answer because we're out of time. But 5G, your outlook. It's a positive. There's more growth.
There's more growth. Yes, we're about now 5.5% of population coverage. We've rolled out in 15 cities and counting. And, I think for most people in the urban areas, the 5G experience should be almost seamless, at least in Lagos for sure, Abuja. And we're still good. So once we solve the capex deficit that we have to catch up with our capex, we'll roll out more and we tend to increase our population coverage and to make the technology accessible to most Nigerians.
Mr. Modupe Kadri, Chief Financial Officer, MTN Nigeria. It's always a pleasure having you to give us insights on the numbers. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate your time, sir.